So I was wandering through the internet today, and I came across a few stories, which made me look for a few more stories. And the things I found amazed me. Child Protective Services, CPS, DHS, whatever state you're in, depends on what it's called, is here to take care of kids and make sure they're out of harm's way. They're not being neglected, abused, starved, beaten, any of the above. And I found that, especially in Texas, people's kids get taken away a lot for a lot of really wrong reasons. Mothers that don't really deserve to have their kids taken away. Some really good people. Yet, I get online, and the first story I come across, baby girl dies after being placed in a washing machine. Really? She put her kid in a washing machine. A mother suspected of being addicted to crystal meth put her 10-day-old daughter in a washing machine with other wash and placed it on the spin cycle. The baby girl went through most of the spin cycle after being discovered after 40 minutes by a relative. So she was in the washing machine for 40 minutes. I don't know about you, but if I pick up laundry and I put it in the washing machine, I couldn't even mistake a cat for being in the wash. How do you do that? How do you mistake your kid for clothes? That doesn't work. I don't care how much drugs you're on. And is it not protocol that if you go into labor, they test you while you're in labor? Addiction does not happen in one day. It says, suspected of being addicted to crystal meth. Her kid's only 10 days old. I think she'd have something in her system when she went into the hospital. That I blame CPS for, because obviously she didn't need her kid. When Kashant entered the home, she found Fiddler asleep. She had trouble waking her before realizing the baby called Maggie May was missing. When she heard a strange noise coming from the washing machine, she went to investigate. Upon opening the top loading lid and switching it off, she made a grim discovery. So she didn't even get the mom awake. Yet that's people that we allow to continue having children. The next story I found, titled, A Boy Dies, and again CPS figures into the story. As medics rushed a dying Michael Ibarra up to the hospital on August 3rd, he did what his mother allegedly taught him. He covered up his bruises with words. The 6-year-old boy regained consciousness and said he fell down the stairs. His skull was fractured, bruises covered his body like camouflage, scabs dotted his back, and no one in the ambulance believed his story. Really? Why would you believe his story? Oh, I fell down the stairs. Yeah, right. With injuries like that. This is all too familiar. 6 Tuscan kids have now died in the recent years despite actions of Child Protective Services. 6 kids have died despite Child Protective Services. In Michael's case, police say CPS never passed on an earlier confirmed finding of abuse by the stepfather, who's now charged with killing the boy. Confirmed findings. Child Protective Services doesn't want to talk about any of this, of course. CPS officials have clammed up and won't confirm or deny anything, saying that they need clearance from the Pima County Attorney's Office. Of course they don't want to talk about it. They let a kid die. There's plenty of responsibility to go around, though. Reports from the Pima County Sheriff's Department on Michael's death make it clear enough in the months leading up to his death, family members expressed concern about abuse to one another and Michael's mother, Monica, but there's no sign they did much more. Monica Ibarra, however, covered for coffee her husband and Michael's stepdad, who is now charged with murder and child abuse. Even in the hospital, she said that her husband never even spanked him. Well, yeah, okay, he might have spanked him, but he was beating the hell out of him. Back in December, Michael's teacher, David, reported to the agency that the boy had bruises on his face. Michael had missed a few days of school, and when he returned, he had a faint bruise near his left eye. It could have been from just playing, but he figured he'd ask anyway. When I asked Michael what had happened, he was pretty hesitant, and he said his stepdad had pushed him and knocked him down the stairs. Michael also said his mom told him not to tell anyone that his stepdad had hit him. At least that's what the police report says. So there's a police report as well. So what happened? Not much. Michael told the officer Monica told the officer her son slipped down the stairs. Sound familiar? And besides, the boy was prone to telling stories. I thought CPS was supposed to take care of kids and be in the kids' best interest. Yet the kid is sitting here telling them that he's being abused. And the ruling it is he's being prone to telling stories. Why would a kid make that up? At least the cops are willing to talk about their decision not to assign a detective. The bruises were faint, said Assistant Chief Kathleen Robinson. The boy's story was questionable, and there was no history of abuse. Such incidents are normally left with CPS until there's findings of abuse. So it all falls back on CPS. They didn't do anything. Interesting. So the next story I find. Girl died after abuse that left her like a car crash victim. A 4-year-old girl died after suffering and sustaining systematic abuse that left her with injuries similar to those of a victim of serious traffic accident, court was told. Sharon and her boyfriend Peter went on trial yesterday accused of murdering Sharon's daughter Letitia at her home in Huddersfield. When ambulance staff was called to the house, they found Letitia lying naked and lifeless on the floor. Her body was said to have been covered in bruises that suggested she had been repeatedly punched or kicked. She had several abdominal injuries, and her back and head was like a boggy mass. This doesn't just happen in one sitting. People don't just, I'm going to beat my kid to death today, but I've never hit him before. That doesn't happen. So where was CPS when this kid needed him? She also had bite marks, sores, and cigarette burns. Clumps of her hair had been pulled out, and her blood was found on a wall on a pair of handcuffs. Really? Because I think that's things CPS could have found. Had they ever been notified or been, looked into it. Because things like that don't just happen overnight. During the months before her death in December, neighbors had often seen the girl standing at her bedroom window in her pajamas, as if keeping a vigil. Nicholas Campbell for the prosecution told Bradford Crown Court that the two defendants had moved to the house 3 months before the child's death. They received few visitors and the windows were rarely open and curtains were usually closed. There was little evidence of a family life being lived beyond the closed door. One feature was noticed by a number of neighbors, the amount of time that Letitia spent in her bedroom. She could be seen on most weekdays standing in front of the closed curtain of the window, looking out into the streets. Two neighbors were so concerned that they contacted social services, who discovered that the girl was registered with neither a local surgery nor a nursery. When two social workers visited in October, a month before Letitia's death, Miss Wright reluctantly took them to the child's room. As far as they could observe, there were no marks on her, Miss Campbell said. The social workers later checked that Letitia had been registered at a local nursery and took Mrs. Wright's word that she had contacted the doctor's surgery and closed her file on the case. Closed her case. 1 month later, she's dead because they beat her to death. Does that make any sense at all? Letitia attended the nursery for only a week. Mrs. Wright told the school that her daughter was unwell, but the child was soon back at her vigil in the bedroom window. She was last seen at the window 2 days before her mother telephoned an ambulance. The child was pronounced dead in a hospital less than an hour. When Mrs. Wright was questioned by police, she said that her daughter had been a little unwell with diarrhea and vomiting. She claimed that she had given Letitia a bath that evening and wrapped her in a towel and taken her downstairs to watch television. When she returned, she found her lying on the floor. She just found her like that. We don't know how she got all bruised up and burned up and cut up. A pathologist found that the girl died from multiple injuries, mainly forceful blows to the head and abdomen, that had been inflicted 2 or 3 days prior. Letitia also had cigarette burns on her thigh, foot, and 2 bite marks on her arm. Her blood was found on her clothes, on the living room wall, and on a pair of fur-lined handcuffs that were retrieved from the kitchen. Clumps of her hair were found outside in the wheelie bin. Miss Wright was arrested hours after Letitia's death. Initially, she denied living with Mr. Kinsey, who was detained 4 days later. Both claimed that the child must have fallen while they were out of the room. They deny murder and alternate charge of causing or allowing the death of a child. Does it sound like CPS is doing their job in any way? Child Protective Services. That's 4 cases where they should have been involved. Should have, yet hadn't. And I'm sure if I continue looking, I can find cases where they shouldn't have been involved, yet they were. And there was nothing wrong with the kid, and the mom ended up without her kids because they just decided to take someone's kid. That doesn't make any sense to me. They check the children out, and within the next few months, they're dead. Why were they not at least put in a safe home for a week or so while they investigated? Isn't that a normal protocol when there's reason to believe? What are your opinions on all these stories?